Hey guys, welcome to the tutorial. Welcome to the channel if you're new here. We're going to create this abstract metal object, and we're going to do it with a boolean. I still got a little bit of shading to correct here, but I was actually just going to save it. So let's go ahead and start. Alright, so let's get started. Go ahead and Shift A, drop in a UV sphere. You can come down here. I'm going to bring this from 32 to 64. Should be good enough. Then I'm going to shade this smooth. And from here, I'll just take up regular view, G and Z. Just kind of bring this up to the line here. I want to drop in a plane, scale it up just a little bit. Doesn't have to be too crazy. And then what we could do is go over to cycles, and we will turn off scene lights and scene world. You can come over to the world properties and click on color. Come down here and click on sky texture, and then go back to the actual render properties. Come all the way down, middle mouse wheel, and bring your exposure down just a little bit. And why is that not going? There we go. So scene world, you gotta turn that on. Get a little ahead of myself. You could bring the exposure down here, which is going to help this look really nice. And so we could bring the plane up a good little bit. And if you want, I'll go back to solid view. Wherever you end up putting the camera, if you want to just do a render on this, I'll grab the edge. I hit E to extrude, and then Z to kind of bring that up. A for all, Control B, and I will bevel that. Roll the middle mouse wheel up a little bit and get yourself a nice background. Go back to object, shade auto smooth, that's fine. Then I'll come in on the object, Control Alt 0, and that should get me in there. I can right click wherever it grabs the camera, kind of bring it off a little bit. I think that looks pretty good. Now from the render view here, you can go back to the camera and kind of see how it's going to go. And it's always a good idea to kind of set your scene up a little bit first. Definitely set up your lighting and see what you're going to want. Something like that might look good. Just depends. So I'll grab the object. I'm going to go ahead and texture it now. I'll just put a new material on. I'm going to bring this down to a little bit more of a gray color. I'll go to the metallic. I'm going to crank it all the way up. And I'll bring the roughness down just a touch. And I'll go into material preview for Eevee. I want to kind of get a general idea. Let's see, this isn't maybe set up the same way. That's fine. Alright, so what we've got here is the roughness. We want to kind of play around with that. If you want it highly reflective, bring it all the way back. I'm going to throw a clear coat on. And I'm not going to do much else with it. So I think that's going to look pretty good. Am I on GPU? Let's see. No, I'm on CPU. No wonder why it's doing that. Alright, cool. So now it's going to render much quicker. Alright, so what we want to do is let's grab the plane and hit H to hide that. And I hit Alt H to bring everything back. Now, real cool, if you want to select a specific object, but you don't want to try to hide everything in the scene by clicking on it, select the one object and hit Shift H. It'll literally hide everything except what you're working on. And that's pretty cool. And then Alt H will bring it back, and Control Z will direct you the other way. So I'll hit 1, doesn't matter, whatever orthographic view, which is basically your flat or somewhat 2D view, and Shift D, right click to let go, or whatever if you're left click, G and Z to kind of bring this up to about right here, Shift right click here. Now before I go any further, if you don't have the bool tool enabled, you're going to need that. So have your bool tool on, and then once you've got your cutter, which is here, the active object is the one that's going to be cut, you can hit Control minus. And now we've got a very nice boolean cut. But it's not really going to work necessarily the way it is. So you may want to do a couple of things to it. Make sure that you've shade smooth this, but our object that we copied already was. But if you didn't, you want to shade it smooth, then this object, you want to shade it smooth as well. Now the cool thing is, like I'm showing in a lot of my tutorials now, you can go into edit mode with your boolean and your original mesh is still there. So if you just kind of shift middle mouse wheel and zoom in, control middle mouse wheel, gets you inside real nice. And now you can shift alt, right click select, or left, wherever you are. You can grab all of these, hit control B to bevel, get yourself a nice little bevel. Make sure it's just a chamfer basically, so just one segment, then place it. Now you can spacebar search this, extrude faces, and then it'll pop up along normals. Hold shift and move your mouse probably, well, I should say to the left or right, whatever works. Now if you just stop right here, that's all you get. But if you run the mouse to the right a few times, holding shift and then left click to place it, your boolean should end up looking like this, and you've cut clean through. So if you tab back into object mode, you've got this. Now it's got the shading and everything else looking crazy, but don't worry about that. We can fix it. So from here, you could add a bevel before you do too much else. And I'm actually gonna grab the cutter and add a bevel. Now it's a one segment bevel. It's just a basic bevel. I'm not gonna use any of the presets because I wanna just get all that done with the cutter. And anything else you want to do with the cutter, you're welcome to. If you don't want this to be a little cup at the end, go back in and let's see. I'll go back to object mode. I'm going to grab the cutter and I'll hit /. And now I'll jump into face select. I'm going to zoom in till I can get this little spot right here. Looks good. And now I can hit Control plus probably one time and then hit F. And it's going to fill that face and basically flatten it out. So now I can go back to object, /, and now I've got a flat base right here. So if that's what you wanted, then that is what you'll get. Now you can move this cutter around, G and Z, and you could change ultimately where this ends. You could kind of make it look like a cup, whatever you want to do. You could scale it in to something like that, so you don't have so many. It's a little bit more abstract than the one I showed you guys in the beginning. And so yeah, you could kind of do whatever you want. Just remember, don't try to stop your boolean on one of the edges. Okay, so that won't be good if you do. I think that's pretty good where I had it. So I'll grab the main object. I'm going to apply all the modifiers so everything's gone. Grab this one. Actually, let me go back. I'm going to grab the cutter and apply that bevel. Otherwise, it's going to look crazy. Then I'll come here and apply everything. Then I can delete the cutter out. Not going to need it. So now we've got to kind of clean up the shading a little bit. It doesn't look too good. And if you were to go in to the matte caps, choose the red one, and look at this, you'll see all the funky shading and everything. It's pretty broken up. It doesn't look good. So we got to do a little bit of cleanup. So there's a few ways you can go about doing this, and I'm going to hit Control Spacebar and N. Just kind of clears everything, gives me this huge working area. So let's go ahead and to vertex mode, hit A for all, M, and then merge by distance. And when we come back out, all those vertices that were out of place are now going to be fixed. And so that is one way to do it. All right, guys, let's bring up the detail just a little bit here. And we can do that with an array. So what I'll do is I'm going to drop a few objects in. Let's first drop in a mesh cylinder. You can move the vertice size to 64. If you didn't see that, it's usually set to 32. Just set that to 64. And we can shade this smooth and scale it down. Something like that. Looks good. Control A, apply the scale. Now let's Shift A, drop in a plane. Scale that down as well. Doesn't have to be too big. Apply that scale. And Shift A, curve, Bezier curve. And I'm just going to check. That looks pretty good, actually. It's going to be right where I want it for the... I'm going to put the curve modifier there. Alright, so select this. And I think we could We might be able to rotate it afterwards. We'll have to, I'm going to give it a little test run here. Let's apply the scale. And I'm going to shift click so the active object is the plane. Control P, let's parent the object to the plane. Now let's add an array modifier. Something like 10. If you're following along, whatever you want to do is fine. Something under 10 would probably be good. Put this to like 1.5 just to kind of split these. And now I'm going to add a curve modifier. Take the teardropper and select the curve. Now this is going to go around the array. Let's add a couple more, I think. There we go. Okay, so whatever works for you. And that's good. So I'll go to the object properties now, drop down instancing, and switch this to faces. Now for the original instance object, you can turn it off viewport and turn it off in the renderer. Okay, so you can close that up if you're done. And now we need this rotated properly, right? So I want to rotate this, but I'm thinking like it doesn't matter. I'll just hit Y or Z at 90, and then I want to apply the rotation, and you can see the direction it's in. So I'm gonna hit RZ 90, enter, and then I'll apply that rotation so it doesn't get screwy. And all of that looks good. So let's see, do I have to apply this control? I have not done this one in a while. Probably make instances real because they're all instances, and I don't need the planes there. So if that works, we can just delete them. And I'm just gonna select probably, yeah, I think I can delete the curve out. That can go away because all these are instances, right? They're just kind of where we want them. And so I'm just going to select all of these at one time. Control J. Actually, I need one active object, so I'll shift click one of them. Control J. Now it's all one object. So G and Z will bring this up. And now we've got a Boolean cutter. And I might want to do something else. So I'm going to Shift D, right click, and hide that. Then I'll select this and then Shift right click here and Control minus and cut that out. Now, it didn't really do a very good job because it's cutting into the geometry as such. All right, so I was sitting there thinking about this, and I came up with a neat little idea. And so what we can do is make sure the origin of this is to the geometry. It'll put it in the center. Then you can scale these out, and we kind of work on them. So let's go to Tab, Face, and just select one face. And if you select similar, because you may or may not have my add-on, you should be able to go to the same area. Let's see, no. Select similar perimeter. There we go. That's what I wanted. So if you hit Control B, hold down Shift, you'll be able to put a nice bevel on that. Looks good. Don't really have to do anything else. Go back to object mode, and I'm going to scale these back in right about there. Apply whatever scale I've got. Now I'm going to clean this up a little bit first. This is the main object, so you hit Control R, throw in a loop cut, and I'm going to throw in a loop cut that's like right underneath it. Double tap G, you can slide it again, get as close as you can. Then I'll grab this one with Shift Alt, double tap G, and bring it up just above. And that should be enough to kind of create a better tight pattern around these. So Shift click, Control minus, and that looks a lot better. So if I go ahead and apply that, just delete the cutter out. Don't necessarily have to do a whole lot with this. There are some little issues, but you could conceptually just get in here and maybe fix a few of them. Let's see if we can get in here and see what's going on. Alright, so I do have this kind of dead vert area right here. So what I could do is just offer up some extra support elsewhere. and you can press A. I actually pressed, let me press K for this, left click it or whatever your selection button is, hit A to get a straight line, click it again on some kind of edge, and hit enter. And I'll do the same right here. Enter, it's good. And then I'm going to edge select, I'm going to grab this and I'll dissolve that edge, and let's see if that took care of that funky spot. Yeah, I cleaned that up. That looks pretty good. And there's really not too many shading errors, and if you want, you can hit A for all and Alt N and recalculate the normals outside, but I think that's going to be good. So Alt H, bring back everything, the camera view, go back into the rendered view. And as you see in the render view, and I show this in a few tutorials here and there, you'll see shading errors that you never saw before in your rendered view. And you'll see objects you forgot about. So here's the one object. We can kind of go over to a material preview perhaps. And we could kind of, I was thinking about doing something with this, but let's see if I select similar by perimeter again, and then I hit Control B and hold down Shift, might get something like that, and then we could probably scale those in just a little bit. And I don't think the origin's in the right spot. Origin to geometry, and there we go. That looks pretty good. And then these could potentially be a very similar color. Just kind of bring these down and maybe give it a little bit of a golden color, perhaps. Bring the metallic up, something like that. Roughness down just a touch, and then kind of come back over, and you've got this nice like gold bead inset going on. And I'm seeing, of course, a little shading error right here, and that's because there's really no support here. You could kind of go in maybe and fix some of these and do a little bit of manual work. And that's not too bad. It's a little too shiny though, so I'm going to bring the roughness up just a bit. Something like that. Alright, that doesn't look too bad. Alright guys, that's about it. You could render this thing out if you want. And I think if I've got the contrast down a little bit further, that might actually look kind of interesting. Maybe G and Z to kind of bring this up. And I think we could Shift D, G, and X or Y perhaps, and bring another one of these over here. Maybe put that one just breaking the light right there. That looks kind of neat. I think I got that through the plane a little bit though. There we go, something like that. And then if you've got the 3.5, I think it's 3.5 or higher, then you can come up here and go to GPU. And you can pull up the path guiding, put this one, or leave it at 128. Just make sure your samples are at least double that. You could turn on the light tree as well and get some very nice results. You could put some foliage there if you've got the Blender kit. I don't know, I guess type in plant, something like that, and let's see what we get. There's bound to be something, and this in and of itself could be a potted plant. You could put something in it. I don't know, something like that. Get that sucker to load in. And you got to grab the empty and then scale it up, and that's for like most of the plants, and that could just add a little something extra to it. Kind of cool, have some of that stuff out, and then you go ahead and render it and have, you know, something nice. I think I'll just let this go. Okay, never mind. You can see a good portion of it now. It's only 1080p. I usually do 4K or higher. I like the 8K on some things. This seems a little dry, but now you can make your own little funky potted decorated plants or whatever you want and just use some of those cleanup principles. I appreciate you guys watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial.